and welcome back to the Emerging Leaders Podcast. I'm Melanie Claire O'Connor, and I have Shar Weil with me today. Shar is the founder of Blonde and Strong and the host of the Blonde and Strong podcast, has 15 years experience in business management and coaching in the health and wellbeing space. Before we started this, we're just geeking out on consulting with SMEs and the journey between A to B and how to build trust with business leaders. She has so much value to share. Why I wanted to interview Shar for this podcast is because she's also super inspiring. She's been through something that my family has been through as well. I'm super excited to hear her story and her journey of recovery and how she's here to contribute in such a big way to the world. I couldn't think of a better person to begin this series with than with Shar Weil. So hi Shar, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi Melanie, thank you so much for having me. What a lovely introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
Of course. Well, if you'd like to share a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you're about and what you do.
Well, do you know what? I think you pretty much covered it. I'm originally from Southern California. So I'm originally from Newport Beach, California, but I currently live in the northwest of England. And I moved here when I was 14 years old. I've lived here a very, very long time. And this is like home to me, I suppose, like a second home. But I think in my heart, I still always feel American. That's just kind of where I resonate. It's where I feel the most at home, especially on the West Coast there. But, I've had a crazy journey since I've moved, well, throughout my whole life, really, but since I've moved to this country in particular. And I didn't really start my career until I was much, much older, because I moved here when I was 14, and when I was 17, I had a seizure. So I'd only just sort of finished secondary school and I had a seizure, and I didn't really think anything of it because I had it after a night out. So when I had the seizure, me and my friends just put it down to doing too much, having too much. And it was at a time in the 90s where it was becoming more common that people were going out and having seizures and dying. So we kind of just assumed it was something like that. So I didn't really take it that seriously. I just felt blessed and lucky to have survived it. And I made a few changes. I stopped going out, really was the main thing, because it scared me. It scared me to death. So I decided that I wasn't going to do that anymore, and I thought I would be fine. And then 6 months later, actually on my 18th birthday, I'd gone away with my friends to Amsterdam. That first night we were there, I had another seizure.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized that it might be something a little bit more sinister, because I wasn't really doing anything that would have caused the seizure like we thought originally. So I decided it was time I needed to tell my mom what was going on, because I hadn't told her and I hadn't told my work or anything. So I told my mom, and I went to the hospital when I came home just to get checked over, and they stuck me on a year-long waiting list to see a neurologist. There was no mad rush. And again, I had another seizure. My mom was actually a Max Fax oral surgeon at the time in Mornington Hospital. And so she went to the neurologist there and said, "Can you please see my daughter? She's having seizures and she's on a massive waiting list." He was actually a neurologist at a place called Walton Neurological Center, which is the main neurological center in the north of England. So anyone who has any kind of like neurological disease or accident north of London will be sent to this place. Other than the big one in London, this is the second best place you can go in this country for neurological treatment. So I went there, they did a bunch of scans, and they sat me and my mom down and just said, "Unfortunately, we have some bad news. You've got a brain tumor in the left temporal lobe of your brain. Because of where it is, it's too dangerous to operate. So it's actually inoperable. We don't know how long it's been there. We can't biopsy it because, again, it's too dangerous to even biopsy with where it's placed. And unfortunately, we're going to have to just leave it, and it's probably going to kill you before you're 30. What they were basically saying was they had to wait until it grew so big that it was causing so many health issues that the risk reward of operating and me dying was balanced by the risk of me dying anyway, just from the size of the tumor and the seizures that it was causing. So it was a bit of a suck it and see and wait situation. However, I was told that even if they could biopsy it years down the line, that it would just be to do things like maybe radiation treatment, maybe chemo if it was cancerous, or hopefully they'd have some other kind of developments that would come along that would help to shrink the tumor and maybe just buy me some extra time. Yeah. But it was a death sentence. So, at 18 years old, that was a shock. It was a massive shock. I remember my mom just being devastated. But I think at that age, I didn't have a massive sense of my own mortality. I think there's a whole thing about how the brain kind of develops anyway. And when you're in your teens, in your late teenage years, part of your brain shuts off to allow other parts of the brain to develop. And I genuinely believe that your prefrontal cortex, all that shuts down so that the rest of your brain can develop. And I just had, although I understood what they were telling me, it didn't fully register. I actually remember saying, well, that's a bit shit. It was that kind of like, meh. I mean, yeah, it sucks, but I feel all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. I feel okay, so I'm just going to crack on.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hard though. I mean, obviously I was scared. When I feel myself, when I try and put myself back in that position where I was sitting in the doctor's office and they told me, I was scared. And I remember feeling a little bit upset. I think I filled up. I remember my eyes filling up with tears, but I didn't cry. And I just thought, I mean, this sucks, but whatever. I'm just going to get on with it. And that's what I did. So I kind of just carried on and got on with my life because I didn't feel sick every day. There was something inside of me that just didn't truly believe I was going to die. Yeah. And again, I don't know if it's denial. I don't know if it was my age. I don't know if it's just that's who I am anyway. I just always believe everything's going to work out exactly how it's supposed to, because I do have an element of that is kind of how I live my life anyway. I don't know if it was a combination of all of them, but yeah, I just kind of went on and got on about my life. There's a lot that goes along with that. I had to take a lot of anticonvulsant medications, which really impacted on everything. My vision, my energy levels. I was extremely lethargic. The first lot of anticonvulsants that they put me on, I used to hallucinate off them. There was a huge adjustment period with all of that. And I was 18 and I actually had a boyfriend at the time when I found this out. And it was a pretty toxic relationship. And I would say in those first couple of years, there was a lot that went on. I met him when I was 17. I obviously then had my seizure. Then I was diagnosed. He stood by me. There was a lot of things that went on. We moved around a lot. We moved to Prague, we moved to London, and all the while my seizures were getting worse and worse and worse. I was having to take more and more medication. I was having to fly back to the UK to see my neurologist. My mom, bless her, my mom and my little sister were just so worried, because I'm gallivanting around the world with this death sentence looming over me, and I was just living my life as if nothing was going on. But the relationship I was in was very toxic. And when I look back now, it was very abusive. It was psychologically, emotionally, physically abusive. There was a lot of domestic violence, but that didn't happen until a few years in, when I was already very sick and we'd been together for a few years. I don't know if, looking back upon reflection, there was part of me that chose to stay because it was a distraction from everything else that was going on, that I was going through. If you're in an abusive relationship, the abuser takes center stage. Everything revolves around them, and you're fully focused on them and making sure that you're doing everything for them to keep them happy. You're not focused on yourself whatsoever. And I don't know if that was a little bit of a coping mechanism that I used to avoid what I was going through and what I was dealing with at the time, and to really focus all my energy and attention on him. Potentially, I don't know. That's just some reflection that I've done as I've gotten older. But I also know that some of it comes from my childhood and my upbringing, because I did grow up in a very abusive household where there was a lot of addiction, there was a lot of abuse, and sometimes those conditioning that you get as a child does follow you through into your relationships as you get older. So by the time I was 20 years old, not only had I grown up in California with a pretty abusive and toxic childhood, but I'd now moved to a completely different country, had this death sentence of the brain tumor. I was in this crazy volatile relationship, and I was 20 years old. I was still a baby, and I thought I was going to die. So it was all a little bit nuts. The first night, my ex-partner and I had gone out for a meal with his family, and we were walking home and we got in an argument, and he hit me, and it was the first time he'd ever hit me. I was 20, and we'd been together for nearly 3 years, and I woke up the next morning and took a pregnancy test, and it was positive.
Wow. Yeah.
So not only did I have the brain tumor in this relationship, but now I have a choice to make about having a baby.
Wow.
Everything inside me when he hit me was like, oh, well, now I have to leave. All the other stuff he did wasn't really tangible. It was emotional, psychological abuse that you couldn't really nail down and that you could maybe gloss over. But now that he'd hit me, I was like, well, that's it. He's done it. Like, I have to go now. I can't stay in this relationship. But then when I found out I was pregnant and we'd already been together for 3 years, I was a bit like, that changes everything. Now what do I do? So my neurologists begged me to terminate. They said that me and the baby wouldn't survive. There was just no way that with the amount of seizures that I was having, the amount of medication I was taking, the way that the brain tumor was growing, neither of you are going to survive this. Never mind the baby, but you are not going to. And if we have to choose between saving you or the baby, we're going to save you. And that's the way it is. Stubbornly, I've always been very stubborn and willful and headstrong. Everything inside me was just telling me to keep the baby and just to go for it. And I felt like this was my responsibility. I knew the risks and I did it anyway. I felt like I had to take responsibility for my actions, and giving up on my daughter wasn't the right thing to do for me at that time. But when I was 4 months pregnant, I did go into something called status epilepticus, which is a persistent seizure that just doesn't stop. Wow. So anyone who knows anything about epilepsy, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of a seizure is enough to kill you. Yeah. I was 2.5 days.
Wow. Yeah.
For about 2.5 days. I woke up in a hospital. I actually was living in London at the time, and I'd gone to the hospital there. They hadn't helped me. They just left me in a bed. So my partner had taken me, he discharged me because they're not doing anything. You're getting worse. So he called my mom, and my mom drove down to London and picked me up and drove me back up north. She took me to the hospital, and they admitted me straight away. And I woke up the next day, and the doctor was sitting on the end of my bed, and he was like, I'm so happy to see you awake. And I was like, why? What do you mean? And he was like, well, you had about 15 minutes before you were completely brain dead, and we were just going to have to turn everything off.
Wow. Wow.
So, you know, it was a pretty traumatic time. And I think that kind of sums up what that looked like. It was a constant barrage of, you're having the seizures, you're just trying to get through your day. I have my partner he was there for me the best way he knew how, but it wasn't great. And he used to try and make me feel bad about being sick, and he'd call me lazy. I was so medicated. I couldn't hardly do anything. I think I left a giant imprint of my body on my mom's sofa. You had to buy her a new one when things got better and I was able to kind of get up and do something again. But yeah, it was a pretty tempestuous time, and it was scary, but I think I was so wrapped up in everything that was going on. I'd gone into pure survival mode. So I didn't feel like things were crazy. Yeah. I just felt like things were normal. I was just getting on with my life. Throughout that whole time, I was still working full time. I had a baby. I was doing everything, trying to just live a normal, quote unquote, normal life as if nothing was going on. And I never made my decisions based on the fact that I had a brain tumor and I was going to die. That isn't how I approached my life. I just carried on living my life the way that I wanted to live it. The only thing I probably didn't do was, I did at the back of my mind, no point studying, there's no point going to university, there's no point trying to drive my career forward, become like some millionaire. I'm not going to be here to enjoy it anyway. So that was kind of my experience through that. However, as I started to come out My seizures were getting worse. This was a progressive thing. As you can imagine, the tumor grows, the seizures get worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously the brain tumor, as it grows, it puts more pressure on the brain and the seizures start to get worse. So that was progressively going on throughout all of this other stuff that was happening. So my seizures were getting worse, then they were increasing my medication. They were putting me on different medication and playing around with all of that. And that was having a big impact on my life. I'd put loads of weight on because I wasn't able to exercise or do anything. My metabolism was slowed down by all of the medication. I'm quite small naturally. I'm tall but really slim naturally, and I always have been. So I rest around like a size 6 or a size 8 UK size normally. But by the time I was done, I think I was a size 14, 16, and I was tipping 13 stone, which for me is big. It's not for some people, but for me, it was really big. And I felt sluggish and I felt slow and I felt tired and just drained constantly. As my daughter was born, and that was a miracle that she was born. She shouldn't have survived that pregnancy. I shouldn't have survived that pregnancy. And it took everything I had to get through that. She was born premature. There was a lot of complications when she was born. She spent the first 2.5 weeks in a NICU. They didn't know whether she was going to survive or not. And that was really, really stressful. That was probably the most stressful thing I've ever been through, was sitting there in the hospital with her and just not knowing whether she was going to make it or not. It was awful. I still remember feeling that was the most helpless I'd ever felt in my life. And in the end, I checked her out because she wasn't getting better. They're not helping her. I'm taking her home, and if she gets worse, I'll bring her back. And actually, as soon as I took her home, she was fine. She started picking up. She was sleeping. She was eating again. She just couldn't eat. She wasn't able to keep food down. She had reflux. She hadn't developed her sucking mechanism yet, so they were having to tube feed her initially. So it was, and her lung had collapsed when she was born. It was pretty scary stuff, but we survived all of that and we just kept going. Pushing on forward from that, we had an issue within my family where a member of my family ended up going to rehab. So whilst all this other stuff was going on, my family are slowly imploding as well. My then partner was drinking a huge amount, and his drinking was causing even more damage to the relationship, and he was getting more and more aggressive and more violent. There had been some pretty severe attacks that had involved having to get the police out and where he'd been arrested. Eventually, I made the decision to leave him, and my driving force for leaving him was not wanting my daughter growing up thinking that that kind of behavior was acceptable.
Yeah.
And I didn't want her to think that that's how a man should treat a woman. That as her mother, I felt like it was my job to be her role model. And I didn't leave for me, which is a little bit sad. I think if I hadn't had her, I would have probably stayed in that horrible situation thinking I didn't deserve better. But I wanted her to know that she deserved better. Yeah. So whatever my reasons were for leaving at the time, I did the right thing. But at the time, I clearly remember doing it for her and just not wanting her to grow up thinking that's acceptable, because it's 100% not.
Yeah.
When I left, he got worse. I understand people very often ask, why do you stay? Why do you stay in those relationships? Why do you stay? Because leaving is harder than staying. Yeah. And I know that unless you've been in that situation, that won't make any sense to somebody. But leaving can be harder than staying. And actually, the level of abuse ramped up 10 times when I left. There were nights I had to take my daughter and stay in a hotel so that he couldn't find us. He kidnapped her when she was the baby. There was all kinds of stuff that had gone on. And in the meanwhile, whilst all this is going on, I still have the brain tumor to contend with, and I'm getting sicker and sicker. Wow. When I actually left him, I had my first brain surgery because my brain tumor had gotten so big and was causing so many problems with the seizures that they felt like it was time to at least attempt to biopsy it and see if there was some kind of treatment that they could offer me to prolong my life. So I had the first brain surgery and the biopsy came back inconclusive. And it took me about 6 months to recover from that surgery, even though it was only a really small keyhole surgery. And then they said that they would schedule another one to see if they could get a better reading off another biopsy. However, I ended up really sick when I was supposed to have that second surgery, so they had to push it back. But by pushing it back, it was growing and getting worse, and I was starting to have seizures every single day. My mom decided to take me back to California to say goodbye to my friends and family, because at that point there just wasn't a lot of hope. I think they were so concerned that doing the second brain would kill me, and if it didn't, the seizures were about to. So I was at that tipping point where, for the first time since I was 17 and I had the very first seizure, I was now 25, nearly 26. And it was the first time throughout that whole entire time where the reality of how sick I was really hit me. Yeah. And I thought, I can't do anything. I'm having seizures every day. I can't go out on my own. I can just about have enough energy to get up and have a shower and get dressed. I can't look after my daughter by myself. I'd had to move back in with my mom, where her and my little sister were having to look after me and take care of me and my daughter. So my quality of life had diminished. My daughter's quality of life had diminished. And I just thought it was the first time that it really hit me that I was dying. And that I probably wasn't going to make it through this surgery. I'd had to write a will to make sure that my daughter was looked after if anything happened to me, and that I was happy with her care if I didn't wake up. And when I came back to have that second surgery, I remember being wheeled down and being very comfortable and calm and at peace with the fact that I might not wake up, and that was okay. I had to reconcile that. When I went down, I had to completely surrender and let go and be ready to not come back, to not wake up from it. And I was. It wasn't what I wanted, but I was okay with it. I understood that whatever was meant to be will be. I truly believe that everything that happens exactly how it's supposed to, for my own personal growth and for my greatest success. And if I've come to the planet and done everything I've meant to have done so far, and I've learned everything that I'm meant to have learned so far, I won't wake up. I'm done. I can move on. That's okay. But if I still have more to do, and I still have more to give, and I still have more to learn, then I'm going to wake up and I'm going to carry on. I'm going to keep going. And that was how I got through that. And I wouldn't have gotten to that point in my mind if it wasn't for my family. My name isn't Shar. My name is Sharda. And Sharda is the Hindu goddess of creative arts and knowledge. Wow. My family, they've studied yoga for years. They're very, very spiritual. Both my mom and my dad were very spiritual. That's how I got the name. And we were brought up learning and believing in the power of the universe and karma and love and compassion and vulnerability and connection, that we're connected to everyone and everything on the planet. That was just how I was brought up. That's become a new age way of thinking now for people around the room. It's all considered a bit woo-woo, but people are starting to understand it a little bit more and buy into it a little bit more. But that was just how I was brought up. So when one of my family members went to rehab, we had to go to family counseling, and they talked very much in the counseling sessions about acceptance and letting go, surrender, really focusing on yourself and learning how to build and improve your relationship with yourself, and just letting go of other people, not worrying so much about sticking your nose. Keep your own side of the street clean, heal yourself, look after yourself, love yourself. When you change your relationship with yourself, it changes your relationships with other people. All of these kinds of things that I was learning throughout all this chaos going on. I was going to die. I had the brain tumor. My partner was really abusive. I had my daughter who had all of her struggles. I had my family going through the struggles that they were going through. But I always had this underlying faith. Yeah. That everything was happening for a reason. Everything was working out exactly how it was supposed to, for me to become the most empowered version of myself, for me to be able to step into the person that I came to the planet to be. And I just had all this crap to learn. What can I learn from this situation? What is the learning opportunity in this situation? There were days I can distinctly remember the day. It was just after Christmas, and I was sitting in my house, and I hadn't had my second brain surgery yet. My ex-partner was making my life a misery. I was having to go to court about access, and he was threatening to kill me. There was all these things going on, and I remember sitting in my room thinking, I don't want to be alive anymore. I don't want to live my life anymore. I didn't want to kill myself. I wasn't planning my suicide, but I didn't want to wake up tomorrow and be me. I didn't want to have to deal with everything that I was dealing with, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I couldn't find a way through it or around it or under it or over. I was like, what can I do to not have to feel this anymore? And then I realized you can't. You just have to feel it. Yeah. You've got to sit in it. Not only do you have to sit in it, but you have to lean into it, and you have to get curious. You've got to get curious about, what can I do differently? What can I learn out of this situation? What am I not doing that's going to help me, that's keeping me stuck in this bit? And for me, it was making decisions for other people, not looking after myself, not having my own back, worrying about him and what he was going through, worrying about my family and what they were going through, and not worrying about what decisions I needed to make for myself to have my own back. Yeah. I had to learn how to be brave. I had to learn how to say no. Mm-hmm. I had to learn how to ask for what I needed. I had to learn how to speak my truth. Mm-hmm. And that's been a big journey, because initially I thought speaking my truth was just blurting out whatever was on my mind, vomiting my feelings on people and being like, this is me. I'm just telling you how it is. Yeah. I'm just telling you how it is. I'm going to lay it out for you to play it out. Like, it's up to you how you go about it. But yeah. Then I learned that actually speaking your truth is important. We have to do it, but actually the truth is always kind. So how you do that is a whole nother skill set that you have to learn. So I was on this crazy journey. I was still only in my early 20s, and I had all this stuff. It was hard. Yeah. It was hard. I cried many, many days, but I just always somehow believed. I was still very young in that time. I was still learning so much about myself, about being a mother, about being a human, about being a partner, about being a daughter, about being a sister. And I wasn't always that good at any of it. Being chronically ill and fatally ill makes you very selfish. Mm-hmm. It makes you very, very selfish, because you have to survive. Yeah. You have to survive, and you don't have time to think about anybody else. Mm-hmm. My family's experience of me being sick is very different to mine, and some of them are still mad at me about it 15, 20 years down the line. They still think I'm just this selfish bitch because I don't know what they did for me in that time, or I was just thinking about myself in that time. But the reality of it is that we all have different parts to play. We all have different things to learn in these situations. And I do know what it means to be on the other side of that. I do know how much my family did for me. I know how much my friends did for me. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. So my gratitude and love for them is so huge. They may never even know it. No matter how many times I tell them. Yeah. But pushing on and pushing forward through all that, when I had the second brain surgery, they were just going in to do a biopsy, but when I woke up, the surgeon was sitting on the end of my bed with a big smile on his face, and he was like, so I got in there and I thought, I can get that. Wow. Yeah. So I think I got it. I think I removed it all, but I won't know. We'll have to just keep scanning you, keep doing the MRIs over the next so many years, and we'll just see if it grows back. Wow. So I woke up with 20 staples up the side of my head, with my head shaved up the side, which was probably my worst nightmare as a woman. I think that was probably my biggest fear, but it wasn't so bad. They left hair to like flop over it. I was able to kind of cover it up. I came back 10 days later to have the staples out. And when I sat down, he was like, so we have some news. We biopsied the tumor that we've removed. And actually, it was just a meningioma. What? So a meningioma is actually a benign tumor. So it wasn't even cancerous, but it grows from the meninge in the brain, which is from the outside in.
Yeah.
but they thought it was growing from the inside out.
Yeah.
And so he was like, we could have removed it 8 years ago when we first scanned you, and you wouldn't have gone through any of this. But we just didn't know. We did what we thought was right. He's like, we used to use yours as a special case study, and we would get everybody in from the neurological department, all the different surgeons, all the different specialists, and get them to look at it and figure out what to do with it. And he said, if that presented to us a million times over, we'd deal with it a million times the same.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And he was like, please don't sue me.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding? You just told me I'm going to live
Yeah.
the rest of my life. I don't want to do anything but give you a huge hug. I'm so grateful. Like, thank you for giving me my life back.
Yeah.
You know, and I was so happy. He was so scared that I was going to be like, you mean I've spent the last 8 years highly medicated, ruining my life? Like,
Yeah.
but I was just so grateful and so appreciative, and felt so blessed that I was going to actually get the rest of my life to live with my family. But again, I was just nearly 26 at that time, and I'd spent the majority of my adult life at that point thinking I was going to die.
Yeah.
Although deep down in my core, I never believed it.
Yeah.
Never once.
Mm-hmm.
And until the day before I went for the surgery, and I was a bit like, I actually feel really sick now, and I think this could be it. But never really at my core did I ever truly believe I was that sick and that I was going to die. And I think that has a lot to do with why I survived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know not everyone can live in that state, but there was just something inside me that wasn't willing to accept that was my fate, that's what the universe had in store for me. I just didn't believe that was how I was going out.
Yeah.
I just felt like I had more to do. I think there's a whole adjustment period. It took me years after that to kind of even wake up enough to come off the medication enough, because then they have to start weaning you off all the medications. I was taking 13 tablets a day.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Of anticonvulsant medications. And as I stopped taking those and they weaned me off them slowly, my energy levels were going up, my weight was going down. I'd spent years thinking I was lazy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was going into work and I was like, well, that doesn't work very well. Let's change this. Let's do that. Why don't we do this? We could expand here. We could do that. And then everyone was like, where's she come from? What's going on with her? I was so bossy and I had all these ideas and I had all this energy. And then I was like, where's all this coming from? And my mom's like, you've always been like this. It's just the last 8 years that you've been sick that you haven't been like this. You forgot who you are. You've always been like this. You've always been the girl that came in and just saw how everything could be better and you made it happen. You've always been the girl who, if you wanted something, you just went out and got it. Screw what anybody else said. You were getting what you wanted. That was the way it was. That's who you are. That's how you came here. That's how you're going to be. And there was this whole readjustment period. My story is so long. There's so many things that I've been through, whether it's my childhood and the childhood traumas that I endured, whether it's the brain tumor, the domestic violence, the becoming a mother and having to deal with the difficulties around that, with the medications that I was on that caused developmental delays with my daughter that she's just fought absolutely tirelessly through. She's now 20 and she's off at university. She's getting a 2-1. She's smashing life. She says to me, Mom, you're Wonder Woman. Because I'm always saying to her, you inspire me so much. You're so driven. You're so incredible. You never give up. You just push it. You just get anything that you want, that you set your heart on. You do it. And she's like, where do you think I get that from? I get that from you. That's what you've always taught me, that if I want something, I can have anything I want. I just have to work for it, and that I can do anything. And I didn't know I'd instilled that in her, but if that's what I've instilled in her, then I've done my job. I'm happy. Moving on from all that, my transition from being sick to who I am today, all of that stuff that went on from my childhood up to my mid-20s, that's like the story that I tell people. But for me, I feel like that happened to a different person. It happened to somebody else in a different life. I'm so not that person anymore.
Yep, I hear you.
The stuff I've been through since then, that's what's shaped me. That's what's made me. Having to reconnect with myself, having to rebuild my relationship with myself getting to know the true me, being able to let go of all of the limiting beliefs, all of the bullshit stories that have been fed to me about being sick, about being in a family who didn't love, who didn't care, who neglected, who abandoned, who rejected. Being able to reconnect with myself and recondition myself and reteach myself how to love myself, how to value myself, know my worth, to build meaningful relationships, not just with myself, but then with other people, then how to use all that crap that I went through to understand how much strength I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I see all that strength in other people, and actually how I can reach into other people and show them the strength that they've got. Because loads of people, everyone in the world is so powerful. We have so much strength. I believe we've all been put on this planet with our own unique gifts to share with the world, and the world needs to hear us. They need to hear our voice. They need to see our gifts. We're all so busy afraid of what other people think, hiding behind all of our own limiting beliefs. And when I meet people, the first thing I do is I see right through them. Like, I see right inside them. I see all the strength they've got. I can see all of their gifts. I think that's my gift. Mm-hmm. That I can see that in people when they can't see it in themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. When I started getting healthier, once the brain tumor was gone, I started going to the gym. I started looking into food, and I wanted to self-heal because medicine wasn't helping me. Although I needed it, I needed the brain surgeon, I needed the anticonvulsants, I needed some of those big pharmaceutical, I needed those to help me survive, but those weren't the things that were going to help me heal. Mm-hmm. They helped me get through the initial trauma, but they weren't going to heal me. I needed to heal myself now. So I started looking at nutrition and how you can heal yourself through nutrition. I started looking at how emotionally you need to heal to be able to process and move on to that next level. How to deal with trauma and heal your traumas, how to heal your physical body with exercise, with nutrition. I believe we are mind, body, soul. We are 3 parts. You can't just go into the gym and smash the weights and think that that's going to change your life forever, because it won't. It will to a certain extent, but what will happen is all your worth will be tied up in a physical, materialistic entity, and then your life falls to shit. Trust me, I know, because I went through that road. So firstly, I focused on the physical. I lost all of that. I had a chronic back injury. I couldn't do anything. Like, that's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. I had to learn how to heal. I had to learn that you can't put all of your self-worth in something that's materialistic, in something that's actually just physical and tangible. That has to start from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And then these are all just manifestations of things that you've worked on the inside. So I became a personal trainer. I became a nutritionist, a yoga teacher. I looked at all the different parts of how to heal myself and then how to help other people learn how to heal themselves. I just wanted to be able to facilitate a space for them to learn how to reconnect with themselves and listen to themselves, because your body has all the answers. Every question you have, the answer is already inside you. You just can't hear it yet because it's all blocked off with all the noise of all the conditioning that you've been told by society, by your families, by your previous experiences that support what you already believed as a limiting belief, because we seek that shit out. So my whole driver in life now, and has been really for the last 7 years. So my whole driver has been about educating myself enough that I could learn how to connect and do those things for myself. I used myself as a guinea pig. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I used my own healing journey and used my own body and my own beliefs as a guinea pig. Then it was to be able to teach people how to do that for themselves. They come to me, they're like, I want to lose weight. I want to be a size whatever. I want abs in 12 weeks, whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to help you with that. I could, but it's a short-term fix. It's not going to make you happy. Let's look at why you want that. Let's look at why you haven't got it. What's been holding you back from getting it all this time? Are you really willing to do the work? The reality is that we have to do the work, and it's called work for a reason, because it's not easy. Yeah. And you have to be willing to take some really long, hard, deep dive looks at yourself. And you have to be open to facing the scary stuff that's hiding deep in the depths. You've got to be brave enough to give that stuff space and be able to accept it and then let it pass through you. That's the kind of stuff that people, they want this body transformation, but what they don't realize is that what's holding them back from the body transformation is actually something emotional and psychological, and they have to deal with that while simultaneously getting their bodies moving, because the two work really, really nicely when you do them hand in hand. Like, get the body moving, you get the emotional and the psychological side of things moving, fuel yourself really well with good food, and learn, listen to your own body. It's constantly talking to you. It's constantly giving you clues. It's giving you signs. So not only have I had all the brain tumor stuff, but I've had chronic pain. I've had chronic illness. I've had chronic stress, PTSD, all these things that I've had to learn how to recognize in myself, how to heal in myself. It's part of why when I see people, I see their gifts, I see their strength, but I can see the struggle, but I can see past all of that. The feedback I used to get from my clients was, you saw in me what I was capable of long before I did, and you helped me believe it.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. It's why I started the Blonde and Strong blog years ago when I was still working in business management. So we both do like SME consulting, right? It's the same thing. You go into a business and you see the potential of this business. You walk in and you can see all of the greatness that's trapped inside this business that can't get out because they don't know how to show it off right. They don't know how to put it all in order to deliver it in a way that will help them bloom and grow.
Yeah.
And become the biggest, best version of themselves. It's exactly the same. It's why I enjoyed doing that.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved doing that in business, because I could walk in and go, this place is amazing, or that's not going to work. That doesn't serve you at all. We're getting rid of that. And this is where you shine. Let's pull more of that out. Let's get that out. That's your niche. Like, that's where you're going to thrive. And then being able to help them recognize it in themselves, believe in it themselves, and then being able to push forward. So it's the same thing, whether it's a business, whether it's a person, because behind the business is a person. And there's, what am I passionate about now? What am I doing moving forward? I'm passionate about connection. I'm passionate about relationships, your relationship to yourself, and in turn, your relationship to other people, because I believe that we're all connected in the world, and that anything that I do to someone else, I'm actually just doing to myself. So I like to lead with kindness and compassion and love. And I like to draw that out of other people. So that's why I started the Blonde and Strong blog. It's why I turned it into a podcast, because I know I can talk forever, as anyone listening to this will be able to attest to. I just figured, what's the point writing when I can talk for hours? May as well turn it into a podcast. But the whole point of that, again, with the Blonde and Strong podcast, was very similarly to yours, was getting people to share their stories or their knowledge. So I get experts on as well, but it's that whole concept of being able to strengthen and empower people, to be able to tap into that inner strength that they've already got that they don't even know about, be able to light that spark and empower them to want to learn and grow and improve that relationship to themselves. And then to know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
That they're not the only person who's been through this before. Whatever pain and trauma and struggle that you're facing, you are not the first person to have done this. You are not the first person to have been there. Someone has been there before you, but they just didn't tell you about it. Yeah. And they struggled through it alone. But we aren't alone. We never have to be again. That's the beauty of the podcast. That's the beauty of the internet. It's the beauty of the world. Now, we are all connected, and you don't have to go through your struggles alone. Find your tribe, find the people that you resonate with, find the people that you feel connected to the most, who speak to your heart and make you light up and sing. That's what I'm passionate about. And that was the point of the Blonde and Strong podcast. So from that, it's led into doing the radio, which, I don't get quite as in depth on the radio, because the radio stuff's just fun. And again, I get paid for talking.
That's good. I'm a writer first before I'm a speaker. I need to write things down and then speak it. So I love speaking to people they've got the speaking gift. as well, because
I will never kiss the Blarney Stone because it would be overkill.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good.
We'll go. I'm going to come. We're going to have coffee and then we're going to have whiskey and we're going to kiss the Blarney Stone. I'm not. I'm going to take you though.
What's that? Yeah, I'll kiss the Blarney Stone first. There we go. That'd be wonderful. But my God, you have so much to give, and the connection that you maintained to your faith, but it's faith of your own understanding, your faith in yourself through all of it, that it's truly inspiring. And anything I can do to support you to get your voice out there, to serve others, I am all for. What I love to do is I love seeing people doing what they're here to do in the world. And anything I can do to support them, I'm all about that. So how can people connect with you? How do they get hold of the podcast? How do they find you? How do they hear more of your amazing wisdom?
Oh, thank you, Melanie. That's so kind of you. You got me all like choked up over here. Yeah, people can connect with me on Instagram. I'm on as Blonde and Strong, so it's blonde.and.strong, or you can find me on my website, which is just www.blondeandstrong.com. The podcast is called the Blonde and Strong Podcast. It's on every podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I do it on YouTube as well, because with this whole Zoom COVID situation, I've actually just been recording the podcast like this on Zoom and throwing the video up, which I think is kind of nice. I like to see people and listen at the same time, kind of have it on in the background. I've tried to keep it pretty samey across the board so that people can find me easily enough, but Instagram's probably the platform I'm the most active on. I just love connecting with people. I love hearing from people. And if there's anything I can do to help and support anyone, please do reach out. I'm here.
That's awesome. I think our purposes might be somewhat aligned, because mine is all about connection, and the core of everything I do is about connection. And hearing some of your story, I've had some specifics that have been different, but some of the elements of the learning and the journey, I was like, oh yeah, I resonate with that stage in myself as well. It's about so much more than what you went through with your brain tumor. It's an element that really connected obviously deeply with me, what we went through in my family with my dad. He went through.
And you can share that story when you feel comfortable doing that. I would love to have you on.
All right.
Because it would be good for me to hear it from another perspective as the daughter of someone, who was ill and going through all of that. It's one of the things I learned. I ended up watching a documentary. They did a series on the TV, Walton Neurological Center, actually, where I had my treatment. Yeah. It was on Channel 5 or something. And it was about the journey for everyone, of all the patients, all of their families, all of the doctors, all of the surgeons, the nurses, and it showed it from a 360 degree of what goes on when someone is admitted with a brain tumor.
Wow.
And it showed the family's journey, the patient journey, the surgeon's journeys, the doctor's journeys. And that for me was eye-opening. And so I think it's important to remember that even in a journey like that, it's not the person with the brain tumor that's affected, it's everybody. And very often the one who has the brain tumor is the one that's the most protected.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're the one that has the most support from the family and from the doctors. And then they're just battling their own internal mindset with what's going on and trying to reconcile things themselves, whereas it's actually the people around them who are supporting them that are going through an absolute unsupported whirlwind of emotion. Yeah. And I think that's something that's really important. So I think your story is an extremely important one to tell, Melanie.
Oh, thank you. I would love to. Well, if everyone watching, you must do yourself a favor and make sure you connect more with Shar. I am in awe of you. And I'll make sure that I put all the links to connect with you further underneath this when it's posted online. It'll be on YouTube, Instagram, and on our content hub online. So it'll be wherever we can put it. And I'm sure this is not the last conversation that we will have.
I think when you have purposes that are aligned, you just attract the right people. You attract your tribe. I believe that. Like, we've connected on Clubhouse. We've ended up in a room together and immediately resonated with one another. And I love that I love that we can do that. Stuff like that is what I live for. I live for that kind of connection. And I already know that you and I are going to be great friends. This is the first thing that we're doing together.
Okay, cool. Well, I will wrap it up there on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for the Emerging Leaders podcast. One of the core essences of it that is becoming clear with me when I get ideas, they usually percolate for a while and then they get a bit clearer and then it's get a bit clearer. And this has been something that's been about a year in the making. But in essence, it's really about believing that every woman has a story and every story is worthy of being heard. And every story, when it's owned, has the power to transform the world. This is all about finding inspiring leaders like yourself who are committed to getting their stories and their messages and their desire to serve others out into the world. So it's a pleasure, and I will see you for the next episode of the podcast very soon.